This is the 8-9 Combo.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And, mate, Australian rugby domination is complete. Australian teams occupy 4 of the top 6 places in Super Rugby Pacific and right now, and frankly, we may never lose again.
I have always really had such a wonderful time on the Roar and riding with Australians and getting the comments back of how quickly you guys are ebullient and then also very discouraged.
Yeah. yeah.
It reminds me of
I reserve the right to say the polar opposite next week.
Yeah. It reminds me of something, and I'm not getting political at all, guys, but just as a wartime in general, Ariel Sharon for Israel, and they said the Syrians have invaded from Damascus all the way in, they're taking over Israel, and he said, the same road that leads to Jerusalem from Damascus leads back to Damascus. And then the invasion was rolled back with a vengeance. And all I would say is, Australians, just, enjoy it, but don't talk too much noise to the Kiwis.
No, it's just amusing. It's just amusing.
I do wonder what the third teams. Obviously the Chiefs and Crusaders are setting themselves apart. It is curious now to me which one will be the third New Zealand team.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah,
and who it ends up being in Australia too, because at the moment it's
good
Brumbies. It could be any of them. So anyway, I actually can't think of the last time Australia. It may well go back to original Super 12 days when there were 3 Australian teams in playoff spots. And yes, it's round 6 and it doesn't guarantee anything, and I get all that. But just the fact that it's happening now is something in itself. We can't wait, mate, to rip into a great rugby chat with the great Tony Johnson very soon. But we start, like we always do, with cheers and jeers. And I'm leading off for you. I hope you're going to enjoy this. My cheers for you is to scoreboard operators around the rugby world simply for keeping up. These were the average scores this weekend around the world. In Super Rugby Pacific, it was 40 points to 23. In the URC, it was 29-25. In the Premiership, 38-18. In the top 14, 31-23. In Japan, it was 37-28. In Major League Rugby, 33-24. And our YouTube viewers are seeing on screen a picture of the end of the Toshiba Panasonic game. That was 42-31. So that's averages of mid-50s, mid-60s points per game last weekend. It's mad. Scoreboards are overheating with use at the moment.
That's a good point and a good cheer, and it's sort of is characterizing the season so far. My only worry is it memorable enough? It's like that old Randy professor was teaching somewhere, and he said, I've been intimate with 1,000 women. And his colleague rejoined him and said, then you've probably been intimate with not even one. So like the whole idea of memorability, setting the stage, the spectacle. If you're just scoring tries willy-nilly, it's a bit like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And also, I think for sure it's going to favor the teams with depth, because I think these players are just ragged out already.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Squad depth is going to be tested, no doubt. What do you have for me?
So I cheer or I jeer. I had the choice. I'm going to cheer. I'm using the words of Charlie Morgan, our good friend from the Telegraph. He wrote about the 13th minute of the West Country Derby on Sunday between Gloucester and Bath. And Charlie writes, a scrum inside the Gloucester 22 presented David Flatman a chance to turn David Attenborough. What followed was around 50 seconds of broadcasting gold as TNT sports viewers were treated to an engaging and insightful account of the set-piece duel between Benno and Affo. And then Flatman says, if you tell the viewers that scrums are boring and too complicated, they will eventually believe you. I love scrums, and they can be boring. Equally, backlines being shut down by defenses and committing handling errors can be boring. Kicking can be wonderful, inspiring, threatening, but also dull. And he closes with this great. Flatman says to Charlie, the scrum isn't going to disappear no matter what people think. And I just think it's worth reminding people there's a lot going on there. If something is entertaining and informative, you'd hope that someone with no interest in scrums might go, all right, that's it, is it? And he just went into this beautiful, almost breathless, quiet voice, almost like a golf commentator, and just going flat back, long back. What he wants to do is roll here, there, and it made it so interesting.
Well, we'll put that question to Tony Johnson in a minute. I saw this clip.
Everyone watch it.
It is fantastic. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, just go onto the socials. It's all over the place. It's just what we'll absolutely go into this with Tony, because it was a fantastic clip that I think broadcasters around the world could absolutely get involved with and learn so much from too. No doubt. A quick message before we get into this week's ep. Then, if you are watching the 8-9 Combo on YouTube, just hit the red subscribe button just down there in the bottom corner. And if you're listening to us via Spotify, Apple Pods, or any of the podcast platforms, just quickly hit the subscribe button right now. Thank you in advance, and that's the best way to ensure you don't miss a thing. Super Rugby Pacific has started incredibly well in 2025. Teams that were up are down. Teams that were down are up. Weekends are far from predictable. Tipping is almost impossible. And as I mentioned, scoreboards all around Australia, New Zealand and Fiji are overheating from all the ticking over. And in the middle of it all, doing his best to keep up with the action as well on Sky Sport in New Zealand is the great Tony Johnson. Welcome back, mate.
Lovely to be with you again, fellas.
Welcome back. It's been a high scoring start to the season, hasn't it? How are you keeping up?
Oh, look, I've been loving it. I've been doing this since day dot. Back in 1996, I was on radio in those days.
Yeah.
And then for the first 3 years of it, then I went to TV. And I can honestly say that all of the things that you want to see, because let's remember that Super Rugby was it was the first professional rugby package. It was all about entertainment. It was all about engagement of the fans. It was all about excitement. And I cannot remember a first 5 weeks that have delivered quite so much as these ones had. We've had everything. We've had, as you say, high scoring games, but these aren't the days of defence optional, which it was in the early days of Super Rugby. We've had fantastic conditions to play in. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget that. And this, of course, you're playing at Churchill Park in Lautoka. It's a different universe, a story all of its own. We have had, great skills. I think the refereeing, I know there was some controversy last weekend, but the refereeing has been good. This determination to keep the game flowing right around the world, certainly to the fore, but that doesn't work unless you've had buy-in from the players and the coaches. So I think add it all up. And of course, upsets, we've got it. The Australians way more competitive this year, which is so good for the competition. We've still got, the X factor that Moana Pacifica and the Fijian Drua can bring. And so I don't think I've seen a better first 5-6 weeks of Super Rugby.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Yeah. On New Zealand rugby, you lost a giant of the game over there this week.
Yeah, Alex, or Grizz, as he was widely known, Grizz Wiley, who was an All Black. He went away to South Africa in 1970, and then on the tour of Britain and France, Ireland in 72, 73. He became an All Black coach as well. And I think if you were to get someone to do an identikit picture or an AI generation of a player who defined that 1960s, 70s definition of what they used to call a meanie, then it would come up looking something quite a lot like Grizz Wiley. That's not to say he wasn't a dirty player. He was a hard player, hard-nosed player, a guy who never took a backward step and probably did bop the odd player, but that was commonplace in the game back then. But away from the field, and of course, 200 games for Canterbury, and became an All Black coach. Actually had still measures up in terms of the success ratio that he had. All came to an end in the 1991 Rugby World Cup at the hands of Australia, and that was there's a whole story behind why that happened. But away from that, actually off the field, and I was lucky enough to spend time in his company. Actually, really nice guy. Always had time to stop and have a chat. Loved the game. He passed away in my old hometown of Picton, just in the last week or so. So it's a loss, and it's always sad when someone of that generation, someone who stood out in the game, passes away, because the legend will live on. But yeah, it's just part of the passing parade, I suppose.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting and compelling how many stories I read in the aftermath of people who really learned from him, loved him, felt like he was a great man. But then also I was just, trolling around and I saw a video of him fighting with a spectator as he was talking. This was a complicated man.
They caught the tail end of it, and that was, of course, I'm pretty sure that was the great game. Some say still the greatest game of provincial rugby ever played in New Zealand, where John Hart's Auckland team went down to Christchurch and they had this phenomenal match. It was a high-scoring game, and it went right down to the wire. But I think someone gave Grizz a gobful as he came down out of the stands, and maybe even pushed him. And the camera cut just as he was kind of pushing back. You might call it a push, you might call it a fend. I couldn't remember. Yeah. I mean, if Grizz had really wanted to hurt him,
yes,
it wasn't. Yeah, that was. And of course, there's also the famous photograph of three of them that were dubbed the Mafia on the 72-73 tour. Alan Sutherland, Grizz Wiley, and Tane Norton, and the black broad-brimmed hats that they were wearing, and they were immediately dubbed this as if it was some really sinister, evil thing. It was an absolute fabrication by a British media that were, I think, hell-bent on discrediting the All Blacks at every opportunity. They just bought those hats in Vancouver on the way over. Sid Going, who was going bald, wanted a beret to keep his head warm in the British, Irish, French winter. And they went into his hat shop and they saw these hats. They thought, this will be ideal for our Sunday court sessions. The jury can wear them. And then, of course, as Tane Norton said, they couldn't put them in their suitcases because they would squash them. And so they had to wear them. And a photographer saw them getting off the bus wearing them, asked them to pose for a photograph. They weren't exactly grinning ear to ear, but it just took on this whole sinister connotation they called it. Right. I can promise you that Alex Wiley and Alan Sutherland were hard bent, but to call Tane Norton, one of the great gentlemen of the game, a mafioso, I don't think so. But it is an image that will live on. Probably the second most famous image of that tour, after the one, of course, of Keith Murdoch heading to Euston Station on his way to catch a plane, supposedly back to New Zealand after he'd been ordered home off the tour. So yeah, there's every. Well, they say every picture tells a story, but the story behind that doesn't quite tell the picture.
No, it doesn't quite do it justice.
I love the idea of people having costumes and outfits for their judging in court sessions. We just had Tane Edmond on, and he was talking about his time at Harbour and how Sean Stevenson and Bryn Hall were the judges du jour, and he said they were very fair. Of course, he has to say that now. But I love this.
He also said that they put him up every week.
Yes. I think he liked the attention. It's interesting inside all clubs. They have this tradition, and I know you know Sean Stevenson pretty well. Do you think he's a fair judge?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, can I just say, I'm actually doing the Hurricanes Waratahs game next week, and I know people will be really looking forward to seeing Tane Edmed back in New Zealand, except he's not known as Tane over here. He's Tane. Just as Tom Savage, the Englishman who's playing for Moana Pacifica, is now Tomasi. I can't tell you just how popular Tane Edmed was when he was in New Zealand. The team really warmed to him. I think he warmed to the team. I think it was good for his rugby, and we're looking forward to seeing him back in action this week when a very important game in Wellington that I'm so looking forward to.
We had actually never got to ask you about Tane. I had every intention of doing it, and I'm just remembering I didn't ask you.
Yeah, Tane. I mean, obviously, we have Tane Norton. It's a Māori name. It's a very
it just
popular
fits.
name, and it, this is part of you fitting in, champ. It started off. Well, no, it didn't start off as a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was just, this is it. From now on, you are Tane, and it a red-headed Tane. But as I say, we loved having him here. And can I just say on that note too, I was one of the guys who was a little bit sceptical about what James O'Connor would bring to the Crusaders, given a bit of a checkered background and a career that certainly had its high points and some not so high points. He has been absolutely fantastic, hearing nothing but positive noises out of, the Crusaders camp, the whole region, about what he's bringing. He seems to have, he's settled down there. He's in a very stable situation domestically, quite obviously. He is bringing real value to the point where people are saying, come on, give him a start.
Yes.
He has been, his presence, I'm sure, is no small ingredient in what is an absolute resurgence by the Crusaders this year.
Yeah, and it's a really important point, Harry, because you can actually see when he comes on, there's, if there's a risk that a bit of panic might be setting into the Crusaders late in the game, O'Connor comes on and just calms everything down. He says, it's all right, guys. We've got 14 minutes. It's fine. We just need to do X, Y, Z, and we'll be okay. Everyone all right? Yep, agree. And you can see his impact on the team.
Yeah, but he's always been fearless, and the thing about James O'Connor was never about the lack of belief in himself. He's always had a belief in himself. It was just maintaining it, controlling it, channeling it. And what I like about him at this stage of his career, he's not even that old, to be honest. I mean, there's other people out there older than him. He's just been around since he was 20 or 19. He has a way of calibrating it now. But Tony, Mike, I always have a question about the Crusaders. Are we now looking back on 2024 almost like that was the outlier for the Blues and the Crusaders, and they just kind of reverted back to their real selves? How quickly?
It's a question that a lot of people are asking here, Harry. First of all, I think you can safely say that 2024 was an aberration for the Crusaders.
For sure.
And I think when we talked about it last year, I used the word schadenfreude, how everyone took such fiendish delight in the way this team that had dominated the landscape for so long was struggling. But it was never going to last, that struggle. Rob Penny has found his feet there. No one was at all sympathetic to the injury woes that they had last year. But, of course, they've got a fitter squad this year. They've made some changes just around the leadership. They've said to Scott Barrett, you just get on, you do your job. And I think he'll probably be more and more prominent as it wears on. Their role players are doing an exceptional job. Guys like Antonio Chalfoun, a bit of an unheralded lock, has been terrific this year. So I just think that they've found the formula. They've got the balance of the team is right. And, I really do think that, this is a genuine resurgence by the Crusaders. The Blues, well, it's just everything that worked so well for them last year isn't working this year. And I got a theory. Last year, it was all about ruthless efficiency, physicality, relentless physicality. Their set piece was good. Their support play at the breakdown was excellent.
Yeah, it was immaculate.
But they had to go into some fairly dim places, to win games. And that was this brutality, this beautiful brutality that they played with. Yes, they have got a massive injury list, 12, 13 players, including some of their elite players. Bowden Barrett, who just set fire to Eden Park in the first half of the game against the Brumbies. He's out of action. But I just wonder, is it proving really, really difficult for them to go back into that space, that willingness to absolutely put the body on the line for every game, having done it so well last year? It's just a theory. It's just a speculation on my part. But I wonder whether that might be what is one of the issues there. Look, I wouldn't even now write them off. They were dusted up good and proper by the Crusaders at the weekend. They've got a bye, and then they play the Hurricanes. If they were to lose that game, then I think, their chances of making the top six outside at best. But it's so tight that I think a win of 3 or 4 games in a row, and their second half does look a bit more winnable than their first, then maybe there is, still hope for them. But at the moment, the needles move very much more towards the no than the yes. Yeah,
their issue at the moment is that we've got 10 rounds to go, and that's it's still half the season, but they're not going to win all 10 games. They've only won 1 game so far, and you're almost certainly going to need, I would suggest, at least 9 to be comfortable inside the top 6. So they've got to win 8 of their next 10 in order to be in the frame. And so, like we were saying last week, Harry, it's similar to last year, and we were saying, are we really going to write the Crusaders off? I think we're going to reach that point about the Blues a lot earlier than we finally did about the Crusaders last year, because even up until 2 weeks out of the finals last year, there was still thought, could the Crusaders still come good? Now they didn't, of course, but that time is becoming an issue now for the Blues.
Yeah, you think Vern Carter would just tell his guys, we're playing knockouts from now on. This is knockouts. We're just going to play knockouts.
We've got 10
knockout
weeks
rugby,
of finals.
and our style suits knockout rugby. Let's just forget all the bonus points and all the try and spectaculars. Let's just win, and let's just grind people down. And I think that's what he's got to do, or it's going to be one of the most spectacular post-championship season debacles.
Well, we don't know whether we have to put an asterisk against the Crusaders 2024 season or the Blues.
Like, whose was worse?
There's an asterisk there somewhere. I'm just not sure where it goes.
Oh.
How's your tipping going this year, Tony? Because ours is battling. We're not going great.
I'm not actually involved in any tipping at the moment. I've got into the fantasy rugby.
Oh, have you?
I got to say, has been a winner.
It has,
I think they were hoping for 25. At one stage, there was a chance that they weren't even going to get it up and running for the first week. They managed to do that. They were hoping for 25 at the start of the competition. Well, it was closer to 50. There were over 60,000, 70,000. And it's that fan engagement thing. I'm in a league at work, which is starting to get pretty tasty because, some people just can't help themselves, when it comes to the old bragging rights. I'm doing okay. I think I may have peaked at around 700th out of 60,000. And if I'd ended up there at the end of the year, I would have taken that. I think I've slipped back a little bit, but I've still got my bonuses to a couple of my boosters to play. But that's been a success story. I think that's helped. And one of the things that I've loved looking around the game, certainly here in New Zealand, is that there are a lot of kids at the ground, young people at the ground. They have made access for families a lot more financially viable this year, and because times are pretty tough. The discretionary dollar, it's not there for a lot of people. So I think having things like the fantasy and the giving away the flags and all that sort of stuff, it's been really good at getting the kids involved. And again, it's just another ingredient that's making it, I don't know, it just seems to be so much a better competition this year.
Yeah, it's been a huge winner because, as you say, it's a fan engagement thing. It gets people looking at teams and players they ordinarily probably wouldn't have looked at. Who like this weekend coming. There's only 4 games, so people are now having to go, well, I can't pick from those 3 teams. It's been a big thing, and I think the fact that Sky's been heavy in promoting in New Zealand, Stan and Nine have been heavy in promoting in Australia, as has the guys in Fiji, and it's just got a really high level of cut through, and everyone knows about it. Everyone knows someone who's playing it.
I nearly got myself into trouble last week. In fact, talk about something blowing up in my face, karma. When I found out that Tupolvai was pulling out of the Chiefs team, I pleaded with our presentation team not to say that he was pulled out so that all the people that got him wouldn't get any points. And I could change my player.
That's dirty.
And well, of course they ignored me. I was only joking. And then I didn't press confirm when I changed him out. And when I looked at the score the next day, I realized Tupolvai, no points.
Oh, you still had him.
Because I hadn't changed him out properly. And then the next day, Cody Taylor pulled out. And I didn't realize, I only switched on in time for kickoff. And so I didn't get any points for him either. I think it was something like that. So you've got to be, it's a reason to watch the pre-match.
No doubt.
One of your players might be pulled out of the game. But yeah, it's fun. And, I will remember in the early days, we used to have this thing over here called virtual rugby. And it was a tipping competition. I used to love that. It fell into the wrong hands and it fell over in the end. But these are the things that get people talking about the game during the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Tony, obviously there's a difference in watching a game on TV and going to the game itself. And I'm always curious about how game day experiences go. I mean, over in South Africa, in Durban, you can swim in a pool. You can go to 5 different beer gardens. You can have a braai for 5 hours. I mean, you basically, when you say, what are you doing this Saturday? And I say, go to rugby, that's the whole day. I mean, it's an 8-hour experience. I did notice something, in the more staid, stolid Loftus, that they're having a collaboration with the Embassy of Italy in Pretoria around this zebra game, and they're gonna, put pasta out there and an Italian theme. And it's just interesting to me because we're all trying to do the same thing. DJs, halftime shows. Like, when you're commentating, is it hard if there's a really banging DJ? Or is it almost too much noise?
Yeah. Well, firstly, can I just ask you a question in return? How do you think pasta carbonara would be a food match for Clip and Coke?
Listen, it's just all going to go into the beard.
I can't see it myself.
It's just
there's only one way to find this out.
All the tomato sauce is going to go on the beard anyway, and they're just going to lick it up later. They don't care. Come on. That's Praetorians.
I must say, there's one ground in New Zealand where, in particular, that I'll say is Napier. And it was always a pain to go there because the PA was so loud. And then I found out that the master volume knob for the PA was actually in the back of the commentary box. And I used to turn it down. And the guy on the sideline would turn it up from down on the sideline, and I would get up sometimes in the middle of the game and turn it down again. And then I came in the next season, they twigged to me, and when I went to turn it down, it was in a cabinet that was locked.
The thermostat was taken away.
Wow.
Yeah. Look, I find, it depends. I mean, sometimes, like, as I've probably said to you guys, one of the most forgettable days that I've ever been privileged to be part of was the World Cup final in 1995. And they were playing Shozaloza and Hekung Deboka and all these things in the middle of the game. And I thought it was fantastic. Certainly preferable to a plane flying 10 feet over the top of the stadium. So I don't mind it. If I never hear Sweet Caroline again, it wouldn't worry me. But yeah, I think sometimes those guys, they do start to think that maybe the whole crowd's turned up to listen to them. But, and you don't want them taking over the atmosphere because you want there to be some chanting and stuff like that. You don't want them being necessarily led. And that's where I think in the Northern Hemisphere, definitely, with the rugby, the way the Irish sing, the way the French sing the national anthem, even at Twickenham with that old song about slavery. But the football crowds are just amazing. And it's something I think we've always envied here in New Zealand, is that tribal sense that doesn't need someone winding you up from the PA booth.
I do like in Murrayfield that they use halftime for an actual mini concert, and it's really well done. They get up there and they play 3 songs. It's a proper, alt kind of music, indie rock, and it's good fun. And I think about that a lot, about how we bemoan people not coming to the stands, but bottom line is people like adventure, they like experience, and they want to be entertained.
Yeah. And look, my daughter, for example, she's 17 years of age, but she loves going to the rugby with her mates, and I've managed to get tickets, or sometimes I buy a couple of tickets because they just love being part of the crowd.
Yeah.
And as long as people enjoy that, that's what live sports. I still think no matter how good the television coverage might be, I think nothing quite beats being there.
So are you running out of verbs for try scoring this season yet?
I just don't rotate.
Of course. It's a big, thick compendium of options. It's been really interesting to hear all the commentary around, this has to be the best start of the season, or this must be the best start of the year. Have we ever seen a better start to the season? Everyone seems to think that it is. Some of us, yourself included, obviously, have been there from the start. You're in a very good position to say it. But it's actually harder to try and pin down what the cause of it is, isn't it? So, what do you think?
Multiple reasons. Look, and let me just say that the Australian teams, it's good to see 4 of them in the top 6, in the sense that there's no longer that, oh yeah, we're playing an Australian team this week, money in the bank. Not the case. The Reds, the Brumbies, we haven't seen the Waratahs yet, but we're seeing them here this weekend. That's the ideal scenario. I know you were making your sort of little brocades thing at the beginning. I must say, one of the best comments I've read so far this year about the scenario was on the Raw, which I always look at every week. And a guy wrote, "It's just great to see the Australian teams going. Obviously, having 4 teams is good. Just imagine how good they'd be if they only had 3 teams fewer."
Oh my god!
Yeah.
The race to nowhere.
Let's drop it. Let's drop another one.
No, let's have the Wallabies play.
It was just a tongue-in-cheek. It was just a tongue-in-cheek comment. I think it's been great. But, it has worked. But I also think, on a serious note, that one of the reasons why the Australian challenge is a lot stronger this year, it's not just about spreading your butter over 4 pieces of toast and not 5. I think also the standard of coaching now that you have in those Australian franchises, or clubs as they like to call them, uniformly, I wonder whether has it ever been better in terms of 4 head coaches in particular, and the crews they've got around them.
It's a fair question, because certainly Dan McKay will say himself, he's come back from one season with Leicester in the Premiership as a better coach. He learnt so much over there. Les Kiss has been saying that for years. Stephen Larkham's been saying it for years. Simon Cron is surrounding himself by good people over in Perth. So there's no question that's had an impact. What I find fascinating about the talk about, obviously going back to 4 teams in Australia has had an impact, but the demise of the Rebels hasn't made the Crusaders good this year. The demise of the Rebels hasn't put the Blues off their game. It hasn't changed how competitive Moana Pacifica is. So the demise of the Rebels has had an impact on the Australian teams, no doubt, but not the other 7 teams. And that's I think the harder thing to put a pin on. It's not just what's happening in Australia that's impacting the whole competition, because the impact is competition wide. There's no question about that.
And look, it was sad, to see the demise of the Rebels.
Absolutely.
Because, I was at the World Cup in 2007 doing the reunion show that I used to do, and we actually had a guy on from the Victoria Rugby Union. He was talking about the dream that they had of having a team in Super Rugby. I just felt this incredible enthusiasm and desire, and you just felt like, this is a great vein that could be tapped here. It just, didn't work out. And of course, you've got to remember that it is one of the toughest sports markets in the world, Melbourne, to crack. But that's the downside of it. But look, I don't think you can underestimate. You can't say that it hasn't made the other team stronger, which has been good for the competition. It's just an unfortunate victim, I guess, of that rationalisation. And I just hope that they can take test matches, to Melbourne on a reasonably regular basis, because there are still people. It's one of the great cities, particularly if you're a Tooth fan like me. It is one of the great cities to visit for a weekend.
It is. It's the impact is clear, Harry, isn't it? But as I say, it's harder to pin down what has been the cause.
No, it didn't go equally to the teams too. Even the Waratahs
definitely
did more. And also, depending on who you scooped up and were they ready, like Lucan, wasn't ready, but Leota was, and there's vagaries. My working theory is a bit that in small margins, tiny margins, we always say this, but then when we expose a margin that's tiny, we go, oh, that's nothing. I think the style of play with the go has actually marginally favored the Australian teams, because I've always thought that maybe not in rugby savvy and sort of rugby IQ and making, decisions at critical times. That's definitely New Zealand. I felt like Australians are really fit, and they have fit teams, and they seem to be handling the, props having to run around maybe a bit easier than some of the big giant, New Zealand players. There's a bit of that going on, I think. And And then also think maybe this is maybe a knock-on effect going forward. The idea that the Lions are coming and playing for those, player number 34. I just want to get on the squad. Can Joe see me do this? Can Joe see me do that? I think that could be something.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And the impact there is that, Rugby Australia making, and you've certainly seen it in New Zealand, Tony, references to which players of national interest should, maybe sit a game out. And the Brumbies are sitting a couple of guys out this week who I was frankly surprised to see that they were on the list of national interest. Like, surprised in a good way, but it also, you realise that list is long. Like, it must be upwards of 45 or 50 players who they're looking at the moment. So they're certainly casting a big net, and that would be adding jeopardy, no doubt.
Yeah, but I got on that note, how positive the result for the Reds at the weekend when you consider who wasn't playing for them.
Yes.
It's going to be a really good sign.
Yes.
A guy like Fraser McWright, I know that's an injury rather than a stand down. And boy, I hope it's not a long-term injury, because he's a phenomenal player, that guy. In fact, going back to the fantasy, I have my teams have strongly featured Australian loose forwards. I've had Harry Wilson in there. I've had Carlo Tizzano in there, because, man, he's worth a bucket of points every time he plays. And I've had Fraser McWright in there. Yes. That's an area where Australia is really well off for talent. But that's another layer of it too, the upcoming Lions tour. And boy, are we looking forward to seeing that. I mean, it's quite nice to be able to stand back and watch a series like that. And there's a narrative bubbling away, as it did in the Northern Hemisphere underneath the Six Nations as well. So maybe that's helping to bring the best. But as I say, to me, it's more been about the coaching. Clearly, there is depth there across the four teams. And it's just making for that uncertainty, which you love in sport, because there's nothing more boring than a match that, teams taking the field, probably knowing that they're beaten before the game starts. You really don't know. You can't put too many rings around games, this season.
So you still enjoying this just the same way as you did when you started out? And what keeps you going? Is it just always these new waves of new players, or what? Yeah,
there's always something. I think there've been some years have been harder than others, but this year it's been great. And as I say, it's probably helped by the fact that we've had such a fantastic summer over here, and for once people weren't moaning about rugby starting too early. People couldn't wait for it to start.
Yeah,
the crowds are good, which I always, as I say, I love to see. But no, it's just the whole package. You talked about the speeding up of the game. That's had a massive effect because of the fatigue that it creates.
Yeah,
and I know there's a lot of talk at the moment about 7-1 splits on the bench and all that sort of thing. But fatigue is still fatigue, and you can't replace everyone on the field in the last 20 minutes. It means, that the tries keep coming. We've had so many games in the balance right up to the last minute. The other good thing about it too is that it means, and this is probably something that, we talk about ball and play, and we talk about, shot clocks and that, but the length of the halves. I mean, we were getting used to, we'd have our producer going, we're 5 minutes over, we're 7 minutes over for our scheduled break at half time. That's not happening. The games are actually taking less time to play.
Yes.
Which is a huge positive.
Absolutely. I've Harry talked about this in the past. It certainly mentioned it last year. We noticed that we were throwing back to the network or the league game, something like that, sooner. And the last Brumbies home game here in Canberra was a Friday night, and we were actually able to make a 9:30 drop-off point by comfortably. I did a couple of on-field interviews afterwards. We did a couple of minute wrap-up, and we threw back. So we probably did a 7 or 8 or 9 minute post-match, if you like, and threw back at 9:30, and we We never used to do that. We were regularly having to extend past 10 o'clock. So it's little things like that. Yeah, halves of rugby are suddenly only taking 45 minutes, Tony. That's the big thing. Maybe not even 45 minutes.
Well, one of the games on the All Blacks end-of-year tour last year, I think, because of the number of, I think scrums alone took up something like 10 minutes of play in the first half. And it's certainly not just happening here. I think there's a determination going on all around the world. A guy I'd single out for a bit of praise is Phil Davis, the former Wales number 8, and he's coached national teams around the world. I think did he coach Namibia? I think he might have at one stage. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But Phil's a guy who, or maybe last year, I think it was last year, might have been the year before, did the rounds, and he talks to people, and he wants to know what people in different areas of the game think about it. And I think he's got to be given some credit for some of these initiatives. Right. Some of which are more popular than others. I mean, they still don't like the idea of the 20-minute red in the Northern Hemisphere, although how you could use the Malvaka incident to try and discredit the idea of a 20-minute red card is beyond me.
Yeah.
But none of these things work unless there's buy-in from the coaches and from the players. Big test will be probably when we get into the international season, because we still saw it a bit. And I don't want to sound like I'm having a go at England, but I did notice in the England-France game, there were still a lot of stoppages for injuries that didn't, you weren't convinced were actually injuries.
Yeah.
When, there's been, say, 10, 12 phases of play, you see a guy down suddenly, he's rubbing his calf or something like that. But these, I guess, I suppose it's a work in progress, but I think it's worked really well so far this year, and not just in Super Rugby.
Yeah. I've talked about losing bonus points a bit in the last few weeks, Harry, and you may be across this, Tony. I'm not sure. There's been 25 bonus points in Super Rugby so far in 6 rounds. 26 bonus points, I beg your pardon. 15 of them are for losing by less than 7. So the majority of bonus points in Super Rugby this year are for losing by less than a converted try. And in context, there was 29 losing bonus points in Super Rugby for all of 2024.
Yeah.
So it's really flipped on its head. You made the point before about games going long, and that's a byproduct of it.
But also we saw at the weekend, Moana Pacifica, who looked down and out at half time in the game at Pukekohe, wasn't it?
Yeah, true. They're down by 40, weren't they?
You talk about scoreboards, by the way. Sorry to digress here, but that was one of the last places in New Zealand to get rid of the old wooden clock with the hand that came around.
Yeah.
I remember doing a game there once on radio with the great Alan Dawson, who played over 200 games for counties. And I made some comment about that wooden arm of the clock slowly ticking towards full time. And he said, yep, I'll tell you what, you can make it go a lot slower than that if you need to. In these tight games, sort of wrestling with the clock to stop it ticking over. But yeah, so getting back to the game, sorry, as I say, I go off on a tangent like that. But
a welcome tangent, that one.
At half time, you thought, Moana, they're out of this. And I don't know how much of it was the Reds sort of kind of thinking that maybe their bye week started after 40 minutes at Pukekohe, or was it that very, very calm but firm address that the Moana players were given at halftime by Whaalongo Tana Umaga, their coach? Whatever it was, we saw this comeback that in the end fell short, but in the process they did deny, because of the way the bonus point system works, where you've got I think it's 3 clear bonus
three tries more, yes.
They denied the Chiefs a bonus point. So there is the incentive to keep playing it out,
yes.
which I like.
Yeah, and that's certainly been the case for a while. We had the case last week where last week there was a game somewhere last week, and it was not in Super Rugby. I can't think where it was. Someone actually ended up with 2 bonus points out of a loss. So it might have been in the ERC somewhere, Harry, maybe someone scored enough tries.
Yeah, because the different leagues have different rules about whether you have to have.
They're still on 4 try bonus points
versus just score enough tries. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, and
it
raises the question, Harry: should you get 2 bonus points when you lose the game?
Yeah, well, you're talking to the wrong guy because I don't even like bonus points at all. I just like points differential, wins and losses. And I like games being longer. I like a rugby orgy where I'm drunk all the time and I like lots of time to go piss and all that. But Tony, I do want to ask you a question. But Tony, my question for you is around this weird dance we have to do with referee, team, TMO, and commentators. Because lost in the discussion, our good friend Jeff Parks brings this up as well, is we need the commentators. The comms have to be in sync a little bit with what makes something a yellow, just a foul, play on, whatever, and then be able to discuss it. Because sometimes you're frozen in the broadcast for about 2 minutes, and no dead air. You're going to talk about it. How much do we want you to opine about that? How much do you want to just kind of wait? How much do you want to go quiet and let the ref and the TMO's discussion be featured? Because a lot of times we're mostly going to get our opinions through the commentator's eyes, or your view.
Well, there's certainly been a movement not only to bring it, it's been part of the TV coverage for a while, but to have the decisions explained for the crowd in the stadium, because they're often the people who are most shaking their heads. If you're at the ground, what was that for? And so that's been a welcome initiative. And it adds to the drama, the sense of the occasion. Look, my own personal style is if the whistle goes, is to shut up, which doesn't come as second nature to me. It might surprise you.
We're not laughing. No. Yeah.
But yeah, and so the referees know that it's on them to explain, and I think generally they do it pretty well. I think what we've had this year is that they have certainly been trying to keep the game moving. I think one thing, and I did speak to one of our top referees before one game, and it was a good open honor. I won't say who it was, but he had watched a couple of games. He said, look, we've still got the onus is on us to make sure player welfare is still paramount. I think there's probably been a couple of cases this year where play has kept going when it should have been stopped for a player genuinely injured. And I know, alluding to what I was saying before, there can be a bit of cry wolf about it sometimes, but you've just got to be careful not to go too far the other way. A snap judgment, it looked like a legal hit to me, play on, when in fact it might not have been the case. And I think whenever you bring in some sort of initiative or a new law interpretation or application, change in the law or a change in attitude towards it, there always will be a point where you think, no, this has become an overcorrection. We've probably moved the needle too far. And I think that probably came to a head in the game in Sydney where, look, I think Ben O'Keefe is a great rugby referee. And he probably himself would say that wasn't his best performance. I don't think it was all him. I think it was a team thing. Maybe we just got stuck a little bit between what's been going on this season and what was going on last year, or even at the last World Cup, which to me was just stained by these constant and almost unwanted incursions by the TMO. I like the idea of decisions being made on the field. I hate the idea of a forensic search for reasons not to award a try.
Yeah,
there are times when
it's ridiculous.
You have to get it right. And I think probably the two most vexed decisions that went down in that game that was refereed by Ben O'Keefe, he got them right. Firstly, the Jorgensen, the slap back into the field of play. Now, you can be lying almost fully in touch in the in-goal area. If the ball's there, you can reach out, touch it, and that's a try.
Yeah.
If it's not in your hands, then to slap it back in field like that is legitimate. The ball hasn't gone out. So he got that one right. And then you get to the knock on. Was it a knock on? And I think what he did, and I think a lot of referees have been doing this, is you allow, you think, mark that moment, because I'm not 100% sure. And he wasn't, yes, he was close, but he wasn't on a great angle to determine, which something was made of that too. I don't think it was as straightforward for him as was suggested.
He did ask, as the player's running away, I don't know that this has been confirmed to me. I'm not sure whether it was clear on the commentary or not, or on the mic feed, but he asked for that knock on to be checked as the player got away. So that's what initiated it.
And you let it play out and see what happens, because it could be a great try. Just imagine if they didn't check that, or the try was scored, it was a brilliant try, and they go back and check, it was okay, because then it would have been.
Well, so Sean Maloney and Morgan Turanui on the Between the Post show on Monday actually nailed it. She said the worst thing the Brumbies did in that instance was scored off that passage of play, because had the Waratahs got the ball somehow and the Brumbies got it back and then scored, they couldn't have gone all the way back. But because it was one long continuous phase, they could go all the way back and check it. So.
And that's the problem. I think it would have suited Ben O'Keefe best if they'd scored immediately, rather than for it to go on and on.
Yes, for another 7 or 8 phases. Yes,
and I think it goes back to that try that was ruled out of the All Blacks in the World Cup, where there had been a knock on, and I think you want the right decision to be made, don't you? In that case, they were only allowed to go back 2 or 3 phases, but back then this one was outside that, but they said, this is a clear knock on. The try can't stand just because of technicalities of the laws. So I think
that's what's probably
a slight change in thinking there. I think a slight change in thinking about how far I mean, look, someone's always going to end up upset. I thought Matt Burke was pretty happy with the decision.
And he's been a great addition to the commentary, hasn't he? Yeah, he's been great.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're in this funny consolidation phase, Tony, to wrap things up. We're 6 rounds down. We're not even halfway. 10 rounds to go, but suddenly everyone's got to try and get themselves into position so that they can push for the final. So these next couple of weeks are actually going to be quite interesting, aren't they?
Oh, for sure, and especially for those teams sort of kind of around the cusp. And like in New Zealand, we're talking about the Hurricanes and the Highlanders. The Blues have got to try and find a way, and Moana Pacifica and the Drua have got to find a way to fairly soon get a bit of a winning seam of form going. Otherwise, I think the gap's 7 points now for someone like the Blues. Otherwise, that gap that'll get bigger very, very quickly. Yeah. But at the top of the table, and look, there'll be a bit of cannibalisation going on as well. We always used to talk about it in New Zealand, that the New Zealand teams would be taking points off each other at inopportune times for New Zealand's chances of actually coming up with a winner. I think I can see the same thing happening in Australia. And there's always, you've got to throw in the joker in the pack, which is a match at Churchill Park in Lautoka. And I think we've seen a couple of times from the Moana Pacifica that they are capable of playing some blinding rugby. And so there's a wonderful uncertainty about it, and just really looking forward to seeing it unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great chat as always, mate. We thank you as always for giving us some time. You've got a fantastic game coming up on Friday night in Wellington. We'll let you get on with your preps. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks, guys, and thank you for having me on the show. I really always enjoy it. So yeah.
Cheers, Tony. Come back more.
Let's look forward to more great rugby.
Definite.
This is the 8-9 combo with Brett McKay and Harry Jones, and mate, just wonderful to have Tony Johnson back on the pod.
Wow, what a good man! And what I like about him is, he has a story about everything. There's nothing you could never stump him. But then also, when we sign off and we're going to go, okay, so thanks, Tony. He just sticks around for another 15 minutes.
That's good.
And then all the really great stories come out.
Yeah, all the stories that he thought of that he didn't say on air. No, it was great. It was fantastic to have him, and he's on the mic for Hurricanes Waratahs in Wellington on Friday night. So make sure you check into that. It'll be a good game. We'll be back with the weekend post-mortem, looking back at all the big games, all the big results from all the big games on the weekend. That's out Sunday / early Monday morning, depending on where you are in the rugby world and when we record as well, of course. So games of the week, mate. Let's get into it. It's round 7 of Super Rugby Pacific. And I mentioned, while we're talking to Tony, only 4 games this weekend. There's 3 teams with buys. There's 3 games there that I think have potential games of the week possibilities there. Hurricanes Waratahs it's nearly must win for the Canes. Brumbies Highlanders is in Canberra on Friday night as well. Is important for both teams because they can't afford to lose too many more from here on. And then Reds Force on Saturday night is just going to be an interesting little derby because those games between the Reds and the Force going back 20 years have just always had something.
Yeah, I think the one for me is the Waratahs game. I want to see
what
they're
I think
made
that's
of.
agree.
It's a bit different. I can actually see the Tars this year being almost better away from home sometimes. Sometimes it could be a relief. Get away from the magnifying glass and just go there and play. I think that'll be a good benchmark, as they say.
Yeah, I think so. The biggest difference between the Waratahs of this time last year and now is that they are games that they're taking losing bonus points out of last year. They're winning.
I think
that's the
like
difference.
as you know, I'm really a big adherent of the points differential. 5-6 rounds in, they've got the 4th best point differential, so they're actually playing good rugby. It's just a matter of in the critical moments, who's managing the game for them, who's on the field, who's their final 15. So that's always interesting too, where Joseph plays, Tane plays, who's coming off the bench at 9. Yeah, it'll be good times.
Yep, will be. Certainly will be. It's round 14 of the ERC, and there's 5 rounds to play there. Again, 3 games jump out at me. Ulster Stormers on Friday night is half interesting to me. It's 9th against 8th, but there's only 1 point between them. So Ulster on 32, Stormers are on 33. Connacht Munster in Galway on Saturday is interesting. That's 12th against 6th, but Connacht could overtake Munster with a win. So there's not much between them. And then Sharks Leinster in Durban on Saturday is 4th against first. So, it's just a good old-fashioned top 4 game.
Yeah. So there's a great graphic I sent it across to you by the ERC where they had the one locked in and then they have the one out of contention.
I don't have it, but it's a good one.
Everyone else in the middle. And just the way they put it, the way they visualized it was nice. My little baby Stormers are in the beginning of this wonderful run they've got where they can really seriously go up to about 6 without too much of a permutation. And you have the little baby Lions also trying to do the same thing, and then you have the big bad Bulls and the giant Sharks. They're doing their thing. So all South African teams could be into the final 8. I think the team that maybe looks like it's getting a bit good at the wrong time is Munster. They're always a worry.
Yeah.
They just seem to have this ability to go, okay, now let's get ready and go, and they could do well in both Europe and in their league.
Yeah, and that's a funny game in Galway. It's the sort of game that Connacht would think we can absolutely win this, but then Munster could easily say, "Sorry, we'll take." They're
getting the guys. They're getting the guys back too. Munster's getting.
They're getting the band back. Yeah. I think they'll be okay. Round 12 of the Premiership in England. 6 rounds to play there, and again 3. Bath v Harlequins is on Saturday. Is 1st against 4th. Gloucester v Bristol is 5th against 2nd. Leicester against Saracens is 3rd v 4th. I think there's something about Bath Harlequins at the moment that just looks like it will be a cracking contest to me.
They have derby week sometimes, in Prem, just like every other league. But I always think in the Prem, it's like every week's a derby. It's almost like there's no pairing that's not a derby in some weird way. I think, on this one, I got to say, I think Thomas the Toy deserves a little bit of a cheer, retro cheer here. The man has scored 20 tries as a prop for Bath.
In his career for Bath. Yeah. And he scored another one weekend, didn't he? Just
ridiculous. The strike rate it's a wing. It's like he scores a try every other match. And that's not even like he should have to check his prop credentials in at the door. That's ridiculous. What is he doing?
Yeah. He's mastered the pick and drive try, hasn't he? He's so good at it. Round 20 of the top 14. There's still another 7 rounds to play there. Claremont, La Rochelle on Saturday, both on 40 points. Claremont's 8th, La Rochelle's 9th. Both need to win that to stay in reach of the top 6. Bayonne Lyon on Saturday is 4th against 5th. So Lyon can potentially make top 4 with a win there. And then Castres v Toulon on Saturday is 6th against 3rd there as well. I think, I don't know about you, Claremont La Rochelle is most interest to me because there's a real danger that the losing team loses connection now with the top 6 from there.
I almost think they're done just mathematically. I think Lyon is one to watch. Obviously Montpellier, Toulon, these guys are playing really well, but I don't know. There's if you're at 9th right now with a bit of a drift, it's going to be really hard to get that top 6 because all these teams can put back their top teams if they want to at any point, especially for home games, and then just shut you out.
It's almost like a loss would be worth like 8 points that you don't get because suddenly you don't get the 4 and you're 4 points further behind. So it's a big game that could well be done. It's week 15 in Japan. There's 8 rounds to play there in the League One as well. I actually think Suntory, Sungoliath, Shizuoka Blue Revs, that's 8th against 4th. It's must win for Suntory, no doubt. But I actually think the game to look at closely there is the Cannon Eagles Toyota for Blitz in Tokyo on Sunday. It's 6th against 11th, but there is huge relegation pressure on Toyota for Blitz right now. If they don't win that, they're done in 2025 anyway, but they are in huge danger of going down to Division 2.
Wow, are they the Blues of the League One this year?
Well, I mean, they didn't win last year. Suntory, I think, are a little bit of the Blues of League One because they've been battling mid-table all year, and there's certainly no certainties this weekend. So, that's an interesting one to keep an eye on for sure. And then to wrap it all up, it's round 6 in Major League Rugby. If I put the right slide up, and the clear pick for me there is goddamn Houston Sabercats against San Diego Legion. That's second v first match in the Western Conference. That's a fairly clear winner as game of the week there. That'd be a good contest.
Yeah, my friend Marcel Brachi from San Diego is chomping at the bit for that one. It's going to be in Houston, and it's that time of year where there's a lot of monsoon kind of weather, windy. I'm going to say right now, kick and chase, a nightmare for the fullbacks. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. The Harry Index is you've done the update. It's hard to keep track of who you've left out this week.
Yeah. So the methodology of this was kind of interesting, actually. Before the season starts, we do a league by league comparison, and it all goes into strength competition. The inspiration for this is this thing called, in college football in the US, there was forever and ever a ranking system that got you into the playoffs, before that the bowls. And it had to do with, retroactively understanding the strength of your schedule. So a win over the Crusaders in week 2 this year, you go, oh my God, it's nothing. Like now you realize, no, that was a pretty good win because the Crusaders are this Crusaders. So it's a floating, forever moving and shifting power ranking. The shapes of the leagues are different. So there's a long tail on the top 14. And there's so many. Also, when you're wondering about Super Rugby's ranking, there's like 40 teams to compare yourself against on non-Super Rugby, and then you have this small group. So it would be weird if there was a disproportionate group. You'd have to wonder. However, New Zealand is always good at national level, and they pick from Super Rugby. So there's an extrapolation. You can go downstream and say, whoever the top 2 teams in New Zealand, probably pretty damn good. And we kind of do this. And then, in the North, you have these Champions Cups, levelers. You can kind of see some stuff. So in the end, the movement is not super volatile at the top. Leinster, Toulouse, Bordeaux, Toulon have been kind of in situ for a while. Chiefs have won some credibility. But look at those Crusaders at number 6.
Yeah. So you gave me another slide to create, and this is, you've shown your workings a bit this week, and we're looking at a second slide here where you've got the Harry Index on the left, and then you're actually showing points differential. So this sort of goes
per game.
This goes a little way to establishing how you make decisions. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, you have to go per game because otherwise you forget the fact that it's 19 rounds into the top 14, and Super Rugby is only 5. So you wouldn't expect the Chiefs to have built as big a high. But if you compare the top, every league, Toulouse plus 14, Bath plus 15, Chiefs and Satyrs basically plus 10, Leinster plus 14.8. There's a clear front runner in points differential. It doesn't lie.
Yeah.
That PD does not lie. It just doesn't. And then you have another rank, Bordeaux, Glasgow, Reds, Bristol, Tigers, that it kind of shows you something. It's hard to get into the Harry Index if your points differential is not in the top 3 or 4 of your league. It ain't going to happen. Yeah,
that's fair. No, it's interesting to actually see a little bit of methodology behind it this week.
And there might come a day, like Wild Knights are plus 12.9. There might come a day when one of these other leagues can get good enough, but right now it's not that day. League One doesn't have that ability. But there could. I can imagine a time when one team was so good in League One that it could get into. The top.
You might. I mean, you might need to start taking a closer look at Toshiba too, because Panasonic are in a bit of a state at the moment. So
exactly.
It's all interesting. Anything else to add?
That's it. Thanks, Tony, for coming and regaling us with stories. I just think, Tony's one of the happiest guys in rugby. That's my postscript about TJ. Also, he's the second most famous Tony Johnson. I Googled Tony Johnson just to get some more stuff on him. And there's like an MMA fighter who's just a little bit more famous in the wider world.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It all makes a difference.
That's the second most famous Tony Johnson in the world.
Who knew? Well, then there's the golf commentator as well. Although
there's some kind of
John, I think.
There's some kind of like toxic masculinity writer called Brett McKay as well. From like Cincinnati.
the art of manliness. Yes. Every now and again I get an email or a LinkedIn request, and I just have to reply, sorry, I'm not the Brett McKay you think I am.
I'm not as manly as him.
I don't have a thumping big moustache. That then is another great episode of the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast behind us. Our sincere thanks to Tony Johnson for joining us. It was absolutely fantastic to have him back. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport. And don't forget, you can find and follow the 8-9 Combo on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Blue Sky as well. And that is how you will keep track of us and how you won't miss a thing. And leave us a rating, a review, share us, all that sort of stuff as well. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed in a rugby podcast. Sean Maloney is ready to go in the closer again. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And we'll be back in your ears with the weekend post-mortem.
Come.
Here goes Jones with another bruising run. He links up with McKay, who pops back to Jones. They can't. They won't. They will. What a try. The Dream Team Combo go in again.